Okay, so our next topic is the ecosystem, and under this ecosystem, the very first subtopic we are going to study is the productivity. As you know, when we study the ecology, in a very first lesson of the ecology, we have studied about the concept of ecosystem. So we have understood what do you mean by the ecosystem, what are the different types of the ecosystems, and how the ecosystem actually functions. And in that particular video lecture, we have understood the example pond as an ecosystem. Okay, so now in the second time when this particular term, that is the ecosystem, is given in your UPSC main syllabus, this literally means you have to study the ecosystem's functioning. Okay, what is the structure and what is the function of an ecosystem, how it functions. Okay, all these things we have to study under this particular single topic. Now this part, only a word, that is the ecosystem, is given in the syllabus. This single word has many subtopics. Okay, and out of them one is the productivity. So students should take care that you study each and every subtopic in order to understand the structure and the function of an ecosystem. Okay, consider this is your syllabus. We are dealing with the paper number 2 and the chapter number 5, that is the ecology and plant geography, and we are here at the ecosystems. Okay, before this we have studied the concept of biosphere, plant succession, dynamics of the community, ecological factors, and the concept of ecosystem, right? So let us understand the productivity. Now see, the components of the ecosystem can be seen as a function, as a unit, when you consider the following aspect, right? Whenever you study the ecosystem, under the ecosystem you study the many things, right? And under this particular ecosystem, when you try to study the many subtopics, it can be divided into the main four subtopics. Okay, the very first is the productivity, second is the energy flow, third is the decomposition, and fourth is the nutrient cycling. The productivity literally means the plant which produce the food material through the process of photosynthesis, all it comes under the productivity. Then this energy which is created through the process of photosynthesis by the plant, it will transfer to the heterotrophic animals, right? That is the animals which likes to eat the plants. For example, the deer are the herbivores, and they can be responsible for transferring the energy right from the plant to their body. Then this particular deer will be eaten by the tiger or the leopard, which is the carnivore, and in the process the energy which is stored in the body of a deer will then get transferred into the tiger. So in this way, the energy flow occurs in a unidirection, right from the plant to the herbivores, and from the herbivores to the carnivores, and from carnivores to the top carnivores, right? This is how to the successive trophic level the energy flows in the ecosystem, right? Then after that we have to study the decomposition, in which if there is a death of a plant, if there is a death of a herbivore, if there is a death of a carnivore, or if there is a death of a top carnivore, this all the dead material within the ecosystem get decomposed by using the organisms like fungi and bacteria. Okay, so decomposition process is there. After the studying the energy flow, then we have to go for the decomposition, and finally we should understand how the nutrients are cycling throughout the ecosystem in a cyclic manner. Okay, that is from the plants to the different animals, and from different animals to the decomposers, and from decomposers again to the plants. How this nutrient cycling is occurring, that we have to understood through the nutrient cycling. So basically we can study the structure as well as function of an ecosystem through the four subtopics, and out of them very first subtopic is the productivity, that we should understand how the plants are able to produce the energy within the ecosystem. And you should know, plants are the only organism in an ecosystem which can harvest the sunlight and create the food energy, and this food energy is running all of the ecosystems. So basically the sun is the source of energy, and plants are only organism there which can harvest this energy, and by this harvested energy whole of the ecosystem is running. Okay, now consider. See, the constant input of the solar energy is the basic requirement for any ecosystem to function and sustain. Now, why we are saying that? Because without the sunlight, the plant will not be able to do the photosynthesis. The sun is the primary source of the sun rays, and through their light, this radiant energy is trapped by the plants, and this radiant energy get converted into the organic food material. Okay, so conversion of this radiant energy into the organic food material, this only be created through the process called as the photosynthesis, and this particular process of photosynthesis is only done by the photosynthetic organism, that is plants. So the sun is the basic source of energy. From where the energy is coming within the ecosystem? The energy is coming in the ecosystem through the sun only. And who is trapping this energy? The plants are trapping this energy, and after trapping this energy into the body of a plant, then it will transfer to the different levels. But here the one thing is sure, the source of energy, the only source of energy which can run the ecosystem is always coming from the sun, that is the radiant energy. Okay, so constant input of the solar energy is the absolute requirement for the any ecosystem to function properly and sustain itself. Ecosystem will only survive if there is a constant supply of the radiant energy right from the sun to the plants. Okay, so see, the primary productivity can be defined as the amount of biomass or the organic matter produced per unit area over a period of time by the plants during the process of photosynthesis. So the very basic and a very simple definition of productivity is that whatever the biomass, or the organic matter which is produced by the plants over a period of time in a per unit area, this is called as the productivity. And you know, the sun is responsible for giving the radiant energy, and plants are trapping them in the process of photosynthesis. And through the photosynthesis, the biomass or the organic matter is get created. So creation of this biomass or the organic matter per unit time, per unit area, it is called as the productivity. So simply, if you want to define the productivity, this literally means whatever the biomass or the organic material which is created through the process of photosynthesis per unit time, per unit area. So plants are constantly creating this particular biomass or the organic matter, and this organic matter or this biomass is constantly running the ecosystem or sustaining the ecosystem. And from where this energy is coming? And this energy is coming only from the sun, right? Now see, it is expressed in terms of the weight or energy. Okay, how we define this particular productivity or biomass or organic matter? We can calculate this biomass or the organic matter in the two forms. Okay, we can calculate by weight, okay, per grams. Then we can calculate the energy in a kilocalorie. Okay, that is how much of the kilocalorie is produced by the particular ecosystem in a given period of time in a given area. Or we can say how much of the weight of the biomass is produced by the plants through the process of photosynthesis per unit time, per unit area. And by both the ways, we can actually calculate the productivity of an any ecosystem. Okay, so the energy or the biomass which is produced by the ecosystem can be defined in a two ways: by obtaining its weight or by calculating its energy. Now, see, it is expressed in terms of weight and energy to compare the productivity of a different ecosystems, because you know the different ecosystems will have the different productivity. Consider the very first ecosystem, which is then rainforest ecosystem, and second ecosystem as a desert ecosystem. Of course, in the rainforest ecosystem, the number of plants will be higher. If there are the number of plants which are more in number when it compares with the desert, then of course the productivity of a rainforest ecosystem will be higher when it compared with the desert ecosystem, which will always produce the lower amount of the food material when it compared with that of the rainforest ecosystem. And how we can compare? We can compare by giving their weight, giving their biomass in the form of weight or in the form of energy. Okay, so always remember the ecosystems are not uniform in producing the energy. It will all depend on the different ecosystems. If they are the rainforest ecosystem, then they will produce the more biomass, and if it is a desert ecosystem, it will produce the less biomass. Okay, because the number of plants which are present in the desert are very less when it compared with that of the rainforest ecosystem, right? Now this particular productivity can be divided into the two parts. Okay, the very first is the gross primary productivity. Okay, the very first type of the productivity is called as the gross primary productivity, and the second one is called as the net primary productivity. In short, we can write it as a GPP and NPP. Okay, that is the gross primary productivity GPP and the net primary productivity NPP. Now you should be able to differentiate between the gross primary productivity and the net primary productivity, because this will be very important from the UPSC mains examination point of view, because UPSC can twist the question here and ask you about the gross and the net primary productivity, and they can make you to calculate whatever the energy which is produced within the ecosystem per unit time, per unit area. Okay, so let us consider the productive. If the productivity is of two type, that is the gross and the net primary productivity, then what is the difference between the two, right? Now see, the gross primary productivity of an ecosystem is the rate of production of the organic matter during the photosynthesis. That is, whatever the organic matter which is produced during the process of photosynthesis, this is called as the gross primary productivity. And you know, in general English term, gross means in and all. Okay, so whatever the product, whatever the organic matter, whatever the rate of our production of the organic matter is there during the process of photosynthesis, it is called as the gross primary productivity. See, the considerable amount of gross primary productivity is utilized by the plants through the process of respiration. See, whatever the gross primary productivity has done there through the process of photosynthesis to run the daily activities of the plant through the process of respiration, some portion of this gross primary productivity is got utilized in the process of respiration, so that the plant can maintain their own body. That is, whatever the food or whatever the photosynthetic product which is created, which is called gross primary productivity, some portion of this gross primary productivity will be utilized in the process of respiration, because plants has to grow, right? Plant has to create the flowers, they has to create the fruits, they has to undergo the process of pollination, they has to do the fertilization, and after the fertilization they will create the fruits, seeds, etc. Okay, and they also have to maintain their body, their roots, their stems, and their leaves. All things requires the energy. So whatever the energy or whatever the mass biomass production has done in and all, which is called as gross primary productivity, out of this GPP, some portion is utilized for the respiration purpose to complete its day to day activities. Okay, so here we have understood what is the gross primary productivity, that it is the total amount of photosynthesis done by the plant and through which the biomass is created. But some portion of this biomass is itself utilized by the plants. That is the R. Okay, so please remember, the whatever the plant is using through the process of respiration, this can be denoted by the R. Okay, R for the respiration here. Now, see, the gross primary productivity minus the respiratory losses. That is, if you minus the gross primary productivity, that is, if you minus the respiration, whatever the biomass which is required in the process of respiration, if you minus this respiration from the gross primary productivity, this will give you the net primary productivity, right? So you can say the gross primary productivity, it's the total product of the photosynthesis. Then out of this total product, some portion of this total product will be utilized by the plants, and whatever remains after the utilization of the plants, this will be called as a NPP, that is the net primary productivity. And this particular net primary productivity, then it is available for the heterotrophs. And you know who are heterotrophs? Heterotrophs are those animals which are dependent on the other organisms for their food needs. That is, for example, the deer is dependent on the net primary productivity. Rabbit is dependent on the net primary productivity, because this is the leftover created by the plant through the process of photosynthesis. So GPP, that is the gross primary productivity minus the respiration done by the plant, is equal to NPP, that is the net primary productivity. So mathematical calculations are involved in this particular process, and that is why we are saying in the mains examination the UPSC may turn and twist these questions. Okay, so make sure that you have clear idea regarding the gross primary productivity, respiratory losses, and the net primary productivity. Okay, and always this net primary productivity is available for the rest of the organism. The gross primary productivity will never be available for the other organisms, because some portion of it will always be utilized by the plant itself, and whatever remains, it is called as the net primary productivity, which is available for the other organisms, right? Now see, this net primary productivity is available biomass for consumption to the heterotrophs, for example the herbivores and the decomposers. Now on this net primary productivity, the other organisms can feed, just like the herbivores can feed on it, decomposers can feed on it. Okay, because this is the leftover from the plant, and the other organisms can easily be utilized. Now when these herbivores will utilize this net primary productivity, or decomposers are utilizing this net primary productivity, some portion of this net primary productivity definitely go into the body of the herbivores or the decomposers, right, after the consumption. Now the here we have the second term, which is called as the secondary productivity. It is defined as the rate of formation of a new organic matter by the consumer, right? Understand this. See, the secondary productivity is that productivity, whatever the amount of the biomass out of the net primary productivity, it is consumed by the herbivore. Now this biomass present within the body of herbivore, now this herbivore will lose some of its biomass through the respiration, right? But whatever the biomass he has accumulated in its body, this is called as the secondary productivity, and this secondary productivity will always present within the body of a consumer, right? So from where it started, actually let us understand this equation right from the beginning. We have talked about the sun. Okay, and sun will send the sun rays, and here the plants can create their own food material. Okay, so the whole food material they are creating, it is called as the gross primary productivity, right? And in doing this, the plant will perform the respiration to complete its day-to-day activity. So the respiratory losses are there. So after minusing the respiratory losses from the gross primary productivity, we get the net primary productivity. And this net primary productivity, which is available to the herbivore, then herbivore will consume it. And after the consumption, whatever the respiratory losses are there within the herbivore, minus that, whatever the biomass which will be present within the body of a herbivore, this is called as the secondary productivity. Okay, that is secondary productivity will always be present within the body of a consumer. We can take the example of any herbivore, for example the deer, the rabbit. They will increase in size after they consume lots of the biomass from the plant, and they will regularly add the fats and the proteins in their bodies by using this net primary productivity. And whatever they are consuming and storing these food material into their bodies, they are this particular storage is termed as the secondary productivity. Okay, so you should have clear idea regarding the gross primary productivity, then the net primary productivity, then the respiratory losses, and then the secondary productivity. Okay, now see this particular primary productivity will depends on the plant species inhabiting the particular area. Okay, so whatever the plants which are present in a particular area, it will be all depend on them how the primary productivity will be there. Of course you should remember that the primary productivity is always done by the plants, right? And the secondary productivity is present within the body of a herbivore. Now this primary productivity, anyways, the GPP is going to create, and after the losses, the NPP will remain. Okay, so this primary productivity, which is done by the plants, it will always depend on which type of the plant species which are inhabiting this particular area. If the plant species which belongs to this particular area are very tall trees and bigger trees, and they were having the very large area, of course they can perform the more and more photosynthesis. Okay, the large amount of photosynthesis can be done by these bigger plants, and they can create the much more amount of the photosynthetic product, that is the biomass or the organic material, which can be later used by the other organisms, right, for their survival. Now it will also depend upon the environmental factors, then the availability of nutrients and the photosynthetic capacity of a plant. Now see, this primary productivity will affected by the many factors. For example, how the environmental factors are there. Okay, how the environmental factors are there. For example, the temperature, what is the temperature there, how is the availability of water, what is the availability, what quality of air is available there, because this will directly affect the photosynthesis, and hence these environmental factors can cause the primary productivity to go higher or to go lower, right? So environmental factors are always crucial in relation with that of the productivity which is done by the plants, which is called primary productivity. Then secondly, availability of nutrients. Okay, in the soil, how the nutrients are present, right? Which type of nutrients are present, will they present in a high quantity, or whether they are present in a very low quantity. Depending upon that, the productivity will get affected. Then thirdly, the photosynthetic capacity of a plant. That is, if you talk about the smaller unicellular algae, this smaller unicellular algae will perform the small amount of photosynthesis to create the very smaller food particles here. But when you talk about the higher gymnosperms or the angiospermic like plant, they will have the very large body surface area, and they contain the very high amount of chlorophyll. So they can perform the very high level the very higher amount of photosynthesis, and they can create the high amount of the biomass in the process. So depending upon which type of the plants are there, what is the photosynthetic capacity of the plant, depending upon that as well, the plants can there will be the effect on the primary productivity. Okay, so the primary productivity will always depend on the environmental factors, then the nutrients available, which kind of nutrients are available, and the plant's capacity to do the photosynthesis. And that is why, therefore, it varies from the different types of the ecosystem. That is, the primary productivity of a one ecosystem is different than the other ecosystem. Now consider this two picture here. The very first picture is of the Amazon rainforest, and this is the picture of the desert ecosystem. This is the rainforest ecosystem, and this is the desert ecosystem. Now, if you observe carefully how the plants are there within the two ecosystem, in the first ecosystem of the Amazon rainforest ecosystem, you will find there are the huge trees, okay, and they were compactly present with one another, and the large area is occupied by these plants. So naturally, the very high amount of photosynthesis is going on in this particular area. But when you compare this with that of the desert ecosystem, you will observe the very small plants are there. Okay, smaller plants are there, thorny plants are there, and they can perform the very small amount of the photosynthesis, and in the process they will produce the very small biomass. Okay, the biomass will be very lower when it compared with that of the rainforest ecosystem, because the availability of a plant it differ from ecosystem to ecosystem. Okay, so whether you are talking about the rainforest ecosystem or you are talking about the desert ecosystem, depending upon that the primary productivity will always differ. Okay, now consider, we will take the example from the textbook to clarify this. See, the annual net primary productivity of a whole biosphere is a 170 billion tons of the dry weight. That is, if you talk about the primary productivity, how much primary productivity is got created over a period of time or in a year of time, it is the 170 billion tons of the biomass is created each a year by the plants which are present on the earth. Okay, so we have the exact number from the ecologist there. The 170 billion tons of the dry weight of the organic matter is created through the process of photosynthesis. Okay, so whole of the biosphere, whole all of the ecosystems, every ecosystem, that is the aquatic ecosystem, desert ecosystem, rainforest ecosystem, we have considered all of the biosphere, and we have created the total of the organic matter or the biomass which is created through the process of photosynthesis. It is found to be the 170 billion tons. Okay, but here is the surprising fact. See, of this, despite occupying the 70% of the surface, the productivity of the oceans is only 55 billion tons. That is, the ocean which is occupying the 70% of the earth's surface, they were responsible for the production of only the 55 billion tons of the biomass. So if you minus 55 billion tons for biomass from the 170, you will have the 115 billion tons of the biomass which is coming from the land. That is, whatever the 28% of land we have, and the 71 to 72% of the aquatic area is there. This particular aquatic area is responsible for the production of only 55%, 55 tons of the billion tons of the biomass, but remaining land area is responsible for the production of 115 billion tons of the primary productivity, or you can say the biomass or the organic matter. So it will all depend on which type of ecosystems we are talking about. Okay, so from ecosystem to ecosystem it will change, and the land plants will always do higher amount of photosynthesis. It will always create the higher amount of photosynthesis or the biomass when it compared with that of the oceanic ecosystem or the aquatic ecosystem. Okay, although the maximum plants are also present within the aquatic ecosystem, but these are generally the smaller plants, algal plants. Okay, and some of the hydrophytes are there, and these are plants where collectively cannot produce the very high amount of photosynthetic product when it compared with that of the land plants. Okay, so we have understood what do you mean by the productivity. Then we have understood the primary productivity, then gross primary productivity, net primary productivity, respiratory losses, and the secondary productivity. All these things you have to take care, understand carefully, and you should be able to twist your answer in the UPSC mains if they ask you the twisted question. Okay, so this is all about the productivity. So this is all about this topic. Okay, thank you very much for watching this video. Please like this video, share this video with your friends who are studying the botany, and if you haven't subscribed to the Botany Option channel yet, please subscribe to the Botany Option channel for UPSC examination. Again, thank you very much for giving your time. See you in the next video lecture. Thank you.